fuck the proletariat. You're such a fucking straight edge piece of shit. I can't stand it anymore. Like, you are like, burn down the proletariat. But let's all stay clean while we do it. Like, listen, that's not how it works.
I have never,
that's not how any
heard
of
me
this
say the
works.
words proletariat other than making fun of Marxism, or let alone burn down the proletariat. Like, what does that
And I'm
even
assuming
mean?
that you're talking into your mic that we're recording. So, Dane, I've got the mic. I'm interviewing you. How hard was your dick when Tom Woods liked your comment the other week? Go.
No, listen, David.
It would be, okay, is it, okay, we'll phrase it like this. Would it be as hard, harder, or more flaccid than if Corey Taylor liked one of my posts on Facebook?
I mean, first of all, you're going to have to answer that second part because the relationship that you and Corey Taylor have, I don't know. He doesn't even know me. I wanted to best him, but I think I'm far behind the power curve right now. The word that comes to mind for me is proud. The concept that comes to you is flaccid or non-flaccidity of the
6 midnight. Like, were you at like 3 o'clock? Was it like floppy on your left side, or was it like...
David, this is way too much detail. It's totally
I'm
unnecessary.
just asking. You're the one spending time on it. I'm just asking, like, how excited were you when your hero liked one of your posts?
I mean, it was cool because it was not on his page. It wasn't on...
It was validation. It was validation, right?
Yeah, it was like, all right, you know, somebody whose intellect and ability to be persuasive I value thought that I was persuasive and made a good argument.
Well, what did it feel like? Because again, to go back to my Corey Taylor analogy, like, I could have only imagined like being picked up on a tour with him, and maybe we're like you the release opening band.
You release a song on YouTube, and Corey Taylor starts following.
Well,
no,
like
page.
This is back in like circa 2010.
For the listeners who don't know, Corey Taylor is the former lead singer of.
He's
Slipknot.
May I tell them about my God?
Yes,
okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
He's the lead singer of Slipknot, which is my favorite band. He's the lead singer of Stone Sour, and he does a bunch of other stuff along the way. Basically, he's the person that I emulated while I was writing my metal music. So that being said,
emulated, but who's keeping track?
That's what I said. Check the records, Dane. I'm sure I didn't, but I'm going to say I'm going to say that I did. Anyway, the point being is that if I got picked up on tour to be like the opening band for Slipknot's world tour, and then one night I was walking off stage after performing a set, and Corey Taylor was standing there. He's like, "Dude, that's pretty good, man. Your vocals on that's tight. That's a good song." Like,
you'd at least
my mind would have shot out of my butthole. What I'm saying.
You'd at least be partial and potentially full candy corn.
Oh, I would have apologized for the massive erection that I'd have pointed directly at him, by the way. So that's all I'm asking is like on a level of 6 to midnight.
All right,
level midnight.
Now that I understand your question better, I would say that as a matter of realistically speaking, I did not have certain bodily functions. However, yes, I was
elated.
It was a point of pride to have a respected intellectual.
Again, it's that validation.
Yes,
you got a validation that the person
maybe I'm not a complete dum-dum, just like 3/4
wanted to get their attention and emulate and maybe go further than. Once they passed the torch to you, you were saying, that's what I wanted. Excellent. Now we can go forward.
Yeah.
And not delete any more jokes.
Which, by the way, this whole lead-in should be deleted based on your whatever. Anyway.
It should be, but it's not going to be. Anyway, you want to get into the episode?
I'm taking my straight man role way too seriously.
You are.
And with that being said, let's transition it into the episode.
Bloop.
Welcome to Weapons and Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 53, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/53. You can find it on YouTube, and you can also link up with us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction anywhere. Make sure to participate in all those algorithm functions, like, share us, comment, all that good stuff. And with that being said, David, we're jumping in, right?
I've already got full tootsies in, about to go full swimsuit, gonna pop up out of the water like Sandra Bullock, just shaking my hair, just letting you know that I've got all them follicles.
It's a horrendous image. Not a Sandra Bullock.
1990.
No. Sandra Bullock is beautiful.
Oh,
you doing a Sandra Bullock thing is what has me terrified. That's what I don't want to see. Don't show me that.
I'm a little offended.
Don't do anything.
I'm not gonna lie to you. You've hurt me. You've cut me deep, damn near to my core. And people should be so lucky for me to flip my hair back like Bo Derek coming out of a pool.
Oh, now he's Bo Derek. Okay.
I'll be all the sex symbols that you want me to be. I don't even know if Sandra Bullock was a sex symbol. Anyway, let's get into the topic of the day.
So today's episode is a little less...
Sandra Bullock wasn't even a blonde. Why did I even go for her? It should have been Pamela, Jenny McCarthy, all the other... Go ahead. Sorry.
On to the more pressing matters. So this is more of a kind of just David and I trying to figure something out through the course of the episode based on something that we read recently. So not as topical current events, but something that we think is important because there's a lot of deep underlying problems in American society that goes along with this. So earlier this week, I read an article at the American Mind, which is just basically a tweet thread from an account called @MartyrMade. And he basically breaks down point by point why Trump voters, or the political right, the conservative right, the religious right, whatever you want to call them, there's a lot of overlap between those different groups, is why they're so disillusioned over the election results and why, maybe there's a little bit more of an explanation for the January 6th situation. And although I believe this thread is very convincing in terms of the whole Trump as a true and legitimate outsider to the American establishment. And I used to think that for a long time. I used to think that, well, the only thing that can explain why all these different groups of society hate this guy with a passion is because he must really be an outsider. And, they're a clique, and so they want to keep outsiders out. But I've transitioned recently. But I got to say that this article, which we will share at wmdpodcast.com/53 in the show notes, I think it lays out a good case for the Trump as a true outsider mode. Now, I don't know exactly where David stands on this. Was Trump an outsider or was he controlled opposition? But we're going to find out starting right now.
Am I supposed to take over?
Yeah, you need to say words.
Commentary of Dane's derelict. I as we all know, Trump was a very poignant figure within our recent history. And it seemed to be this weird dichotomy of you were either with him and you believed everything that he said, or you were opposed to him vehemently and thought that legitimately everything that he said, I'm going to take that again, legitimately everything that he said was a lie, and for his own personal gain, and for Russia's personal gain. Now, all that being said, this is the first time, in my life, certainly, but I think in American history, that an entire population thought that a sitting president was controlled by a foreign country. And that being said, would vehemently use that preconceived notion to defame anything and everything that sitting president had to say or would say in the future. That's what I will say. My post Trump mortem presidency, that's how I viewed him. I would say that he wasn't the worst president we've ever had. I would also say he's not the best president we've ever had. What I will say is that he was the most controversial president that I've ever seen in my life. And there's been a lot of controversial presidents.
So, but to the point of the episode, if that's the conclusion that you have, as an explanation for that conclusion, do you tend more to the side of, and don't be stuck in this binary, there could be a third answer and maybe you have it, but I'm going to posit it the way my brain has been thinking about it is the reason for that conclusion about him being the most controversial, is that a result of the fact that he was a true outsider? So everybody from the media to Hollywood to other DC establishment, they hated his guts because he was a true outsider, and that's why he was quote unquote so controversial? Or was he actually controlled opposition and all of those parties that we just mentioned were actually feigning outrage? They weren't truly outraged. They weren't truly worried about his mental state or what he would do because they knew they had him under control. But they wanted to create that outrage around him because that would, I guess, fly some more cover for what they wanted to do in the future.
What I would say is I think he was an opportunity for both sides. I think he was an opportunity for the Republican side, and i.e. Fox News. Because I don't know where you stand within the media standpoint, but I think the media has a lot more to do with running this country than the actual offices that they report upon. So that being said, I would say that both media syndicates viewed this as a huge win for them. It was an underdog story for the Republican side of the media, and it was a shock come from nowhere side that we need to get a handle on before he gets out of control for the left. That's what I view Donald Trump as. It was this weird media farce that they were both fighting this unseen war between facts and each other's Trump. I hate to steal the name from the guy himself, but both of their trump cards was that they could at any time, and this is, I'd honestly never heard this in the virulency beforehand within the media, but I've never heard fake news thrown around so much or so much doubt upon where someone got their information from before Trump. Like, you have to follow these credos and you have to follow the evidence to unhinge my perspective. But unless you follow all the things that I think are credible, you'll never unhinge me from my standpoint. Therefore, all the things that I view as credible all agree with me. So you'll never unhinge me from my standpoint. Now I'm vehemently locked where I stand, and there's no compromise between it. So now we don't even see the same reality anymore. That's where this whole presidency.
Okay, but that's more conclusion and like where we are as a society today. But this is more asking, what explains how we got here.
Let's dissect the fucking presidency is what we're talking about.
So to do the side that I personally used to, again, if you asked me 2, 3, 4 years ago, I would have said, yeah, I probably think more along these lines than I do today. Because this article and this tweet thread does such a good job in terms of making that argument for the concept of, yes, Trump was a true outsider. And as an outsider, all of the established powers in Hollywood, media, Washington, and around the world were aligned against him, and they were truly outraged by what he was, because he didn't talk like they talked, and he said inappropriate things, and he didn't abide by all the decorum, and they were just truly outraged by him. And the point that this article that this Twitter account Martyr made, was making is it goes through all of the things that pro-Trump, quote unquote, deplorables are told to believe and what the reality actually is. He starts out by talking about how, the FBI and intelligence agencies, we know for a fact, it is not a debate anymore, spied on the Trump campaign. The intelligence agencies under a sitting president of an opposing party spied on a challenging campaign from the opposite party. We know that for a fact. And then,
would you say that's illegal?
After being memory holed and swiped under the rug,
a little bit,
those same intelligence communities engaged in a 4-year campaign of trying to say that Trump was in collusion with Russia.
But Dane, Comey came out 4 days before the election and said that he was going to investigate the emails against Hillary Rodham Clinton. Wouldn't that suggest that he didn't have any party to this particular charade?
That goes to my controlled opposition argument, so I will put a pin in that one for later. But if you'd like to keep going down that
Let's
path.
go down that road. Like, where else are we going
to go? I wanted to get through the bit of the analysis.
Oh, you weren't done.
Top to bottom from Martyr made. I want to make his case for him as strong as possible.
That's the crossroads.
So the same people that are told not to believe the thing that has been definitively proven is the intelligence agency spying on the Trump campaign have been told for 4 years to believe the thing that is not definitively proven and that the special investigator did not definitively show is that, the Trump campaign colluded with Russia and that election was stolen, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's the whole matter of Biden or Biden's son, his, crack-addicted escapades and his computer and everything. If that would have come out under Trump Jr., right, there would be a whole different narrative. And basically what Martyr Made does is he lays out the case. And again, we'll have it posted at wmdpodcast.com/52 of all of the things that the people who would be suspect of the election results were told not to believe or to ignore, which are a definitive fact, and all of the things they were told to be outraged about, which are at best speculative conclusions, is that if you tell those people that for 4 years and they have any slight suspect that the election might not be valid, they're going to run with that. And that's not a completely unreasonable white supremacist thing to do. That is somebody who is disillusioned with the system. That's something they might do. And so that's the point he's trying to make, is that he didn't say this, but if you take Trump as a true outsider, all of this overt bias that happened from every corner of the cathedral would lead you to the conclusion that, yeah, he was a true outsider. And so they did everything they could to thwart him and to eventually steal the 2020 election from him. So that's kind of what Martyr Made is getting at, is that he was an outsider, and here's all of the proof for why the powers that be won't let the American people have their president, so to speak.
Well, to focus on Trump is to not focus on the true aspect of what actually happened. But for my slight little microcosm of this episode that I will focus on Trump is that he was a dualistic candidate in nature. He went against everything that the people that voted for him stood for. He was a rich person born into wealth that never pulled himself up by his bootstraps, that never really succeeded until, what the Fired is that his first real success. All of the things that were he'd always failed, and he said that he made himself when he got how many people get a $1 million go get him, son fund.
Right. So let's be clear. We're not saying that he didn't have certain advantages in life that maybe a lot of other people.
Hold on. Go ahead.
That a lot of other people do have. We're not saying that, but I don't know. Maybe David is. But like what David is laying out there is everything the cathedral told you to believe about. I don't know the specifics of if he failed in this real estate venture, not that real estate, but that's what they told you to believe, right? He's silver spoon, daddy handed him everything from the top. He failed at everything. He's a tax cheat. He's this. Like, they basically threw any benefits that he had in life as on the scales against him. And that was the overwhelming narrative.
Thank you for the caveat. But what I'm saying is most of the people that voted for him were lower income, lower, classed. Not to say that they're low class people, that they just weren't high class, high educated, went to Oxford, went to, Yale, went to Harvard. These people didn't vote for him. But somehow he sold himself to those people. So just that in and of itself, if you grab that man's hands, they would probably feel like putty, whereas most of his voters would feel like hardened steel. That's my point. It's like he got the people that actually work for a living when he's never worked a day in his life. He got them to vote for him. So just that, that's
again the difference between manual labor and white collar labor.
But I'm not getting caught up in that. I'm not getting caught. His whole nature, the whole point of me bringing this up is his whole nature is dualistic. His whole nature within the whole structure was dualistic. So it's hard for me to say whether or not that person in and of itself as an individual was the outsider or insider or the placater or just playing a role. But what I will say is it definitely showed what everyone else around him, what their play call was. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you.
So I hope that I've done Martyr Made's tweet thread. I hope we've done it justice in terms of, we very Cliff Notes version. It's quite a long read, but I hope that we've done it justice in terms of laying out basically what the argument is from the side of Trump was an outsider. The people who liked him or voted for him or whatever the case may be feel like, as they identify with him, despite the fact that he comes from a whole different socioeconomic background than most of them, they identified with him, which, is to David's point. And they felt like they were pushed out of the electoral, like they're told, right, your right to vote is sacrosanct, and that's your voice in the government or whatever. And if they feel like that was unfairly taken from them based on this entire 4 years worth of contradictions they were told to believe, that Trump was a true outsider and that they saw themselves as outsiders. And when they think that the election is stolen, then they're going to be outraged.
If I can surmise, to parlay onto your point, if I can surmise all the things that I just said, is Trump was a mirror. And what you saw in him is what reflected back to you. And it was all the ugliness that we see within the system as it is now. That's all I'll say. Is whatever you saw Trump as is what you saw your problems with the government as a whole were. Not him. Because he was there for 4 years.
I take you to mean not just the people that voted for him, but also the people that hated his guts.
Of course. Right, that's what I mean. It's a mirror. So whoever looks in it, left, right, center, indifferent, it doesn't matter. He was a mirror for you to see what you truly wanted to see and what you truly knew about the systems that were in place are actually doing.
I think that's especially an interesting take, because there is a point there in the article where Martyr Made makes the point that these people that voted for Trump and supported him or whatever, again, going back to David's point of socioeconomic status, a point that Martyr Made made in here was like, these are the people that give their kids like pocket constitutions as like Christmas presents. And that
Grandpa.
On their 18th day, sign them up to go to the military. Like, these are the people that have had a deep and abiding trust and faith in the institutions of the United States government because, they follow the Constitution and, everything the military does is good because the government tells them to do it. Like, these are the kind of people who are now disillusioned by the system. Now, you can say that they're unjustifiably disillusioned and you can say this, that, or whatever. But I think to David's point, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, about the whole mirror thing, is if they see in Trump a true outsider, and they see how he's treated by the establishment, they start to think, well, is the establishment going to teach me or treat me like that? So that's what they're seeing in the mirror. And I think what David's point is that from the left, what they're seeing in the mirror is all of the hatred that they have for those people, right, is projected onto Trump. And Trump represents that lower class, that less than,
or let me offer you a
educated group, and those are the undesirables, the quote-unquote deplorables.
Let me offer you a different take from the left. They saw how quickly and how vehemently he amassed a following.
And it scared the shit out of them?
Exactly. And that's what really got their little tails in the wind and made them say, everything that this motherfucker says has been a lie. He'll never tell you the truth. It's always... What would you do if all of a sudden somebody infiltrated your life and started spreading your lies throughout the entirety of the annals of time? All you would do is try that. All you have left is to discredit the person that's saying all that. That's all you have left. And what did they do? The entire 4 years that he was in office, they discredited him. That harkens back to my mirror, and they were so scared about losing the foothold that they thought they had built for the last 4 years. And 8 years. 8 years.
And last little point on your mirror, correct me if I'm wrong.
Please.
So, in addition to despising everything he stood for, they also went down the evil path of saying he's Hitler, he's a Nazi, he's a tyrant, he's a fascist, he's a dictator, right?
Defamation. All you have to do is just say anything that you will.
Back to your mirror concept.
They're worried. My point.
They're worried about him being a dictator because what do they want to be?
Well, there you go. Yeah.
And it's the fact that he had some different ideas than they had. So his particular brand of tyranny is not something that sits well with him.
It's easy to play as a hero when you're in power.
Right.
It's easy to play that. But once you lose your power, it's real hard to regain your power without seeming like a villain.
Yeah.
So what do you have to do? You have to villainize the person that took your power from you.
Right.
That's the mirror.
If I understand your mirror analogy, and maybe I don't, I'm thinking that you're probably leaning more towards the, yes, Trump was a legitimate outsider and all of these things that happened, like this is why they happened. Well, whether it be because of the mirror analogy or what, is that basically what I'm gathering is you tend to agree that, yes, Trump was a legitimate outsider.
Look at how they pursued their DNC that year. They invited Stephen Colbert to make a farce of it, and they thought that they were going to walk right back into the presidency. Yes. And then when they got caught with their pants down and they got totally motherfucked, excuse my phrase, within the election in 2016, something had to have gone wrong, which is why we started the Mueller report and this, that, and the other.
Okay, so you would say they were legitimately caught off guard by him winning in 2016.
Exactly.
So he was a true outsider, and so they went into total damage control mode, which at that point was just make him the most evil, vile person that's ever walked the face of the planet.
And then as a true outsider, and I don't think he chose to be an outsider altruistically. I think he was an outsider because he's just, and again, I'm making my own assertions as to Donald Trump's characteristics, but I think he is just an egomaniac that only wants himself to be the most talented person ever. He says and does things to make his person more benefited at the end. So all that being said, they got lucky this time.
You mean he's rationally self-interested?
Right. So they got lucky this time. They got lucky this time that they dropped their guard. If they had a smarter person in that position, they'd never see their power again, which it's not those powers that you need to be worried about. It's us. They would have listed those powers on us, and you would see the shatter come to us.
Okay,
go ahead.
Glad we resolved that, because now, after spending 3/4 of the episode establishing the outsider side of the argument, and again, I'm not saying...
Which is the whole part of the argument.
I'm not saying that that what I'm getting ready to say disproves that. I'm saying that I'm now trending more in this other direction. But I do acknowledge and accept the outsider side of the argument. So, having established that and that David probably tends more in that direction, David, I'm now going to try to convince you where I have shifted recently is that Trump was not a true outsider and that he was controlled opposition. Now, I don't think that this started until after the election. So I think that we can probably agree that the 2016 election shocked both those who voted for Trump thinking, holy crap, how did our guy actually get in? As well as, people in the DNC or people that were turned off by Trump is, oh my God, how did this guy become president? It should have been Hillary, et cetera, et cetera. I think both sides were legitimately shocked by that. I'm not saying the DNC intentionally got Trump elected, but once he was, Operation Controlled Opposition went into full mode, whether it be from the media, constantly imbibing into the American public that he is this terrible, unique evil who, you should be afraid is the next Hitler. Or whether it's the generals and the Joint Chiefs that thwarted his goals to try to actually deliver on campaign promises to get American troops out of unnecessary foreign quagmires. His generals worked against him on that. We had the thing come out, I believe, in Time magazine or whatever about the secret people who didn't name themselves in the Trump administration who were taking official documents off of his desk and not letting him see and do certain things because they were protecting the rest of us from him because he was so dangerous. So from top to bottom, front to back, it seemed like, again, the cathedral, all aspects of society, government, media, Hollywood, et cetera,
they was there to protect us.
They spoke from the same
Thank
script.
Christ.
The same script that Trump was terrible. Now, could that be explained by he's a true outsider and they hate his guts? Yes, I acknowledge that. However, I would like to convince you that as opposed to being an outsider, they knew they had control of him once he got in there anyway. They knew he wasn't going to wipe out the entire bureaucracy, the unelected bureaucracy, or that he could overturn acts of Congress, or that, he could overrule the generals. They knew they could control him. So his entire 4 years, as opposed to being characterized by an outsider accosted from all directions, is that the accosting from all directions was a smoke and mirrors. It was an act. It was a game because they always had control no matter what he wanted to do or say.
As always, we agree and disagree within the same moment. I think that you are absolutely right. They weren't concerned with the fact that he got presidency. They were shocked that he got presidency. But they weren't concerned with the fact that he wouldn't be able to enact anything that they wouldn't want him to enact, because they know that they have the hearts and ears of everybody, of all the constituents, and they wouldn't allow him to tear down democracy as they said that he would. That being said, I don't think, going back to the mirror theory, I don't think that Trump really was innately good or innately evil. I think he just showed us the tumors that we have within this democracy, as with quotes around it, as we call it.
Would you say that our society has told itself memes about itself, and that's why it reacts to certain things in certain ways?
Exactly. Like we call ourselves the land of the free and the home of the brave. When's the last time you saw somebody really brave do something? When's the last time you saw somebody truly be free? Can you even label what freedom is? Because freedom is not freedom to do what you want and reprisal from accompaniment of consequence. Freedom is cause and effect, and you dealing with that effect. But nobody wants to deal with the effect anymore. So what I'm saying is, like, we've reached a fulcrum within this quote-unquote democracy that we have to either nut up or shut up. We are coming to a point where people are more than willing to give away more freedoms to feel the same amount of comfort. And when you do that, That's when dangerous things happen like Donald Trump. That's when dangerous things happen like Joe Biden. That's when you start getting talking heads, when the real players at work are behind the curtains. That's what my whole point is. It doesn't matter what Donald Trump was. What I was calling Donald Trump as a mirror is like you saw what you saw in Donald Trump is what you had always feared within yourself and within the organization that brought you Donald Trump. What you saw in Donald Trump was what you had always hoped never happened, but in the back of your mind you knew that could.
So that's all eloquent and very well stated. And I'm thinking,
I've never been accused of that in my life.
In typical David fashion, it treads right down the fence of the argument. Not that it's even an argument. Like, I still think somebody can completely hold to the true outsider narrative in good faith, and
or is it the opposite?
Strong arguments,
right?
But and again, this is getting back to a common theme. I mean, we definitely got to put this on a shirt at some point about human beings being rationally self-interested. And I started thinking to myself is, well, if it was possible that he was controlled opposition, if they didn't truly have to worry about his presidency from a policy perspective or a world status perspective, as they claimed, why would they manufacture so much outrage? And why would the outrage be so hyperbolic, like way, way over the top in terms of the things he was actually able to accomplish vis-a-vis his predecessors, which was not that far off. And the conclusion I came to is I look at COVID and I think 15 months ago, would the American public have ever tolerated under a Donald Trump or any president before him, would they have ever tolerated the government just unilaterally saying you're non-essential and you are essential? Would they have ever tolerated a government from top to bottom talking about going door to door to quote unquote spread vaccine information and possibly work with private companies to censor anybody that talks against it, which is the true textbook definition of fascism? It's government and private industry working together for a government-defined purpose. And as tyrannical as the COVID response has been, I think, would anybody have accepted this under Trump? And I don't think so, because the outrage was he's doing this stuff even before this stuff was happening. But now that it's happening, it's almost like they spent 4 years desensitizing us. And that even though he was controlled opposition, they didn't have to worry about what he actually accomplished. But they feigned and ginned up so much outrage that they could get away with far, far worse in reality. And we would think, this is par for the course. At least it's not Donald Trump. That's my argument for controlled opposition.
Which is what I brought up the mirror thing for, is I hadn't hit to the fulcrum of it until now, which only I realized while you were saying that, is that the powers that be are us. It's the American people. It's what we allow them to do. It's what we allow them to direct us to. It's not about Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was in office when we went under lockdown. Because everybody else, apart from Donald Trump, despite the fact that he held the highest office in the land and was fighting it tooth and nail all the way until it happened, all of a sudden the media said, we are going under lockdown. And then Donald Trump went, I guess we're going under lockdown. So all that being said, like, what truly, and again, we have the power, but who has our ear? Is basically what I'm saying. Go ahead.
I agree with that. I will just say that, yes, technically Trump was in office when the lockdowns and things started happening. That's correct. However, if you'll remember, and we did a podcast episode on this, the number of the episode escapes me, but we talked about how, remember, Trump did not want to use the powers that he had under the Defense Authorization Act, or no, Defense Protect. Anyway, it was one that gave the president, the executive, broad-reaching powers to, like, command sectors of the economy to like make them produce more masks and things like that. And Trump refused to do it. And the cathedral said how irresponsible he was. He wasn't acting like a leader. So he was not engaging in fascistic activities by colluding with private major industry. And that was what made him bad.
You're taking an individual and spreading it over an entire bread covered in butter. Like, the only thing that mandates power in this country is us, and whether or not we can be swayed to something. So, like, again, I don't think that, and I know it's controversial, and I know that we might not see eye to eye on this, but I think that the presidency, as we've been shown for the past two presidencies, at least being Trump and Biden, that the president doesn't have the power that he used to. The president is a figurehead, but
his office has an immense power. But
his office, exactly. But but what he can get away with is tantamount to what we will allow him to get away with. And we allowed Biden to get away with a lot of shit, and Trump or the media during Trump's presidency to get away with a lot of things. So, like, it all comes back down from the power is derived from the masses, not from the office.
But I'm saying it's the opposite.
Don't be stupid.
Because Trump, in particular, again, by not using broad, sweeping executive powers, he was the worst president ever.
Correct.
Right? Which, again, if that's the narrative that you're going to push, is that an absence of action, an absence of controlling more people's lives is actually the word, that's tyranny, then, again, in a true Orwellian fashion, where you make words mean the opposite of what they actually mean,
well,
then
unfortunately.
Then when Biden comes in and he does act like a legit fascist, and his press secretary openly talks about the White House colluding with private companies to censor the flow of information, that is a true fascist activity, but that's perceived as freedom and leadership.
That goes back to what I was just saying.
Or that's the narrative.
What you will allow your president to get away with is what everybody will allow themselves to get away with. That's the mirror dichotomy. That is, if you think Biden is altruistic, you will allow the media to tell you that he's shitting in your fucking shoes and that he's putting daisies in them.
Okay, but the question is, if the mirror analogy is what you're always coming back to, is that better explained by Trump as a true outsider or Trump as controlled opposition? Because that's the debate that
my debate about this is that.
Or is the mirror third way?
Third way.
Okay.
Mirror's totally third way. Like, he isn't that and he isn't other. Don't beatify him and don't demonize him. Trump was a reflection on where American...
I'm not saying what he actually was, whether he personally was good or bad. I'm saying that the reaction to him, was the reaction genuine, as in, this guy's an outsider, we hate him, or was the reaction contrived to gin up and manufacture outrage so that when truly outrageous things happen later under Biden, we're either desensitized or we have a completely warped idea of what outrage is.
The difference between those two is. What's the difference between those two? They all equate to the same outcome. They both equate to the same outcome. Whether or not you truly believe it or whether or not it was just ginned up inside you, you both wanted him out. You both didn't believe a word he said. You both...
His supporters wanted him out?
No, you were only offering the opposition. And to counterpart, when you vehemently oppose the opposition because they don't see the guy that you think is Jesus Christ or your savior or even your front man, when they start attacking your guy, what do? You back him up. You're third man in. So, again, Donald Trump is a tumor from a sickness. Can I say that?
I mean, say whatever you want.
There's a sickness within this state, within this country. There's a sickness to want to fight each other. And it only comes from one place.
Yeah, and we can agree on that, and maybe we're just talking past each other. But the point is
okay, just give me an A and a B. Give me an A and a B if you want.
Regardless of how it manifests, is the explanation for the reactions of humans, whether those humans supported him, were against him, or were in the middle, is the best source to explain the actions, everything that we've seen in the past 4 to 5 years, all sides of the spectrum, is the best explanation that Trump was a legitimate outsider who got in and they weren't planned for, and so they were legitimately outraged by what he had to do and say and the fact that he got elected in the first place? Or was he, yes, his election in and of itself was a surprise, but after that, he was controlled opposition. They were never truly worried about what he was capable of. They were never worried about him being a tyrant, a dictator, a fascist, a white supremacist, and whatever. All of the outrage about him was manufactured. It was fake. Nobody was actually worried about it because he was controlled. He was controlled opposition. It allowed them to manufacture a narrative of outrage so that you don't get outraged later. Which of those two scenarios best explains everything you're talking about with the mirror analogy and human beings?
And all I'll say to that is that, again, I hate to sound sea-erode, but, like, it doesn't matter. Like, neither of which those two things happened matters. Because what happened, happened. Like, I would argue, if I was going to play your game, I'd argue B to the latter, that they were caught off guard, and they never thought that this fuckface would ever get in office, ever. They thought they had a control over the media, a control over the human mind of the United States, and that they'd never lose it. And when they went to the opposite side, that's when you saw, it must have been a Russian collusion, it must have been this, but now I'll say, everything that happens, and I think we've discussed this on the podcast before, everything that one side does, you can expect the equal and opposite swing twofold to the other side. So you said that Trump was a Russian collusionist. He only got in there because Russian got in there.
Yeah, that's what they said.
Yeah, that's what they said.
Yeah.
And now what's happening? The big lie. The big lie is happening. That Biden wasn't actually elected. They used mail-in ballots to do this, that, and the other. And what do you think happens next? It only goes up from here. It only escalates. It only escalates. So what I'm saying is, like, it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter whether you think Trump is a person of interest or not. What matters most is that how we treat each other now and how you educate yourself now.
Yes.
Like, go ahead.
I couldn't agree with you more on all of that except for the part about it not mattering. Because I think that understanding why human beings are doing what they're doing, especially very powerful ones that have a vested interest in things going a certain way because that gives them more control over the rest of us, I think that the reason why they do whatever they do is important. Now, I'm not saying that David's saying that's not important. I'm just saying that, like, that's where I'm coming from in asking this question and trying to wrestle with this debate in my own mind of whether Trump was a true outsider or controlled opposition.
I agree with you, but how he got there isn't important, is what I'm saying. How we view him afterwards is. My whole argument has been not whether or not he got in there by circumstance or by controlled opposition. It doesn't matter. What happens afterwards is what matters.
So here's what I like most about this episode, dear listener, is that in my own mind, maybe David has for himself, in my own mind, I haven't reached a definitive conclusion one way or another in terms of this thing that I'm wrestling with. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but you should definitely tell us in the show notes page at wmdpodcast.com/53 or on YouTube. You know, tell us what conclusion you came to and why, or what is something about our analysis that we missed. Was Trump an outsider or was he controlled opposition? I'm leaning more towards the latter, but again, I'm not firmly in one camp or the other. I think David is taking more of a third way kind of thing. It's not black or white, and it's gray, and it reflects more on who we are as a society and a people.
That's fair.
Than it is necessarily about Trump the man or the reaction to him. And if that's the case, tell us what we missed. Tell us where you agree, where you disagree. But most importantly,
if we're big dumb dummies,
come back next Monday to check out episode 54. But in between here and there,
we're gonna have beautiful fisticuffs. We're gonna fight it out.
American
blood sport.
Bald eagle soaring through the sky. Freedom kind of week.
Fair enough.